Rekha is having a birthday party today. Aylin and Nadia have been invited to the birthday party. They have an invitation card with a map showing the directions to Rekha's house. Nadia's father is going to drive them there. Let's take a look at the map. Is it difficult to go to Rekha's house? What do you think? Discuss this with your friends. Then click on the map. From Rekha's house. However, it is easy to go to Rekha's house using the map. The direction on the map is clear and easy to follow. There are also many important landmarks along the way. When we travel today, we use many things like maps, compasses and landmarks to guide us. Now, let's go back in time. How did people travel from one place to another? What guided them from losing their way? During the day, they looked at the sun for directions. They also looked at rivers or mountains as landmarks. At night, they looked at the stars for directions. Specific stars became landmarks to guide their journey. So, it was important to be able to locate and identify these stars. On a dark night, we can see thousands of stars. How did people in the olden days find the stars that they wanted? Discuss this with your friends. Then click Check. They seem to group together and form shapes in the sky. Just like you, when the people in the olden days looked at the stars, they saw shapes. So, they named the groups of stars based on these shapes. Naming the groups of stars made it easy to identify them. A group of stars with a particular shape is called a constellation. We can see them by connecting the stars with imaginary lines. This is our planet Earth. It is divided by the equator into the northern and southern hemispheres. There are constellations in the northern and the southern hemispheres. About 88 constellations are known to us. In this lesson, we will look at 4 well-known constellations. Click on these constellations to find out more. This is the Ursa Major, a constellation in the northern hemisphere. This constellation looks like a bear. So, the Ursa Major is also known as the Great Bear. Now, look at this part of the bear. What shape can you see here? Click on that part to find out. Of a ladle. This ladle is called the Big Dipper. The Big Dipper is a part of the Great Bear constellation. This is the Ursa Major, a constellation in the northern hemisphere. This is the Orion Constellation. The Orion can be seen from the northern and southern hemispheres. What shape is the Orion? Click on the Orion to find out. If we connect the stars in Orion, we will get a shape that looks like a hunter holding a shield and a club. The Orion is made up of 7 major stars. Can you see the 4 bright stars at the corners? The 4 bright stars are the hunter's shoulders and feet. These 3 stars form a straight line. This straight line is supposed to be the hunter's belt. We can easily identify the Orion based on these 3 stars. This constellation can only be seen from the southern hemisphere. What does it look like? Click on the constellation to find out. It looks like a scorpion with a long curving tail and claws. The Scorpius can be easily identified in the dark sky because of a bright orange-red star. This is the Southern Cross constellation. It is so called because it has the shape of a cross. The Southern Cross can only be seen from the southern hemisphere. It is the smallest of all the constellations. You have looked at several constellations. Now, let's find out the importance of these constellations. Click on any of the pictures to continue. Now, constellations are important to show directions. People in the olden days looked at constellations to guide their way at night. Let's look at the Ursa Major or Great Bear. The Big Dipper is a part of this constellation. Now, look at these 2 stars in the Big Dipper. Let us draw an imaginary line from star A to star B. Then, let us extend the line upwards like this. This line will always point to the Polaris or the North Star. The Polaris is a star that always points towards the North Pole. People in the olden days looked at the Polaris to guide their way to the north. Now, let's look at the Southern Cross. This constellation can only be seen from the southern hemisphere. It always points towards the South Pole. People in the olden days used the Southern Cross to guide their way to the south. Qiblat is the direction of the Kaaba in Mecca. In Islam, Muslims must all turn to face Qiblat during daily prayers. Orion can be used to find the Qiblat. Muslims name the 3 stars that form the Orion's belt as Al-Nita, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka. These three stars always point to the west. So, Muslims around the world can use the Orion as a guide to find the Qiblat. Here are some examples of how Muslims can use the Orion as a guide to find the Qiblat. The Qiblat for Muslims in Malaysia is in the west. So this is how they can use the Orion to find the Qiblat. The Qiblat for Muslims in Egypt is in the east. So this is how they can use the Orion to find the Qiblat. In certain parts of the world, there are 4 seasons: spring, summer, autumn, and winter. Spring is usually the time for planting crops. Autumn is the time for harvesting. However, in some regions, there is not much difference between the seasons. So, farmers looked at the constellations to identify changes in the seasons. Different constellations can be seen at different months. For an example, the Big Dipper and the Southern Cross can be seen between April and June. Scorpius can be seen between December and February. Orion can be seen between June and August. When farmers saw Scorpius, they knew that it was spring. So, it is the right time to plant the crops. Autumn is the time when crops are usually ready for harvesting. Orion can be seen in autumn. So, another way for farmers to know if the crops are ready for harvesting is to look for Orion. Constellations are groups of stars that form particular shapes in the sky. We can see the shapes when we connect the stars with imaginary lines. Constellations can be identified by their shapes. The Ursa Major, or the Great Bear, has the shape of a bear. The Big Dipper is a part of this constellation. The Orion, or the Hunter, has the shape of a hunter holding a shield and a club. Scorpius has the shape of a scorpion. Southern Cross has the shape of a cross. Constellations have 2 importances: to show directions and to indicate seasons. People from the olden days used constellations to guide them when they travel at night. To guide their way to north, they looked at the Big Dipper, which points towards the Polaris. To guide their way to the south, they looked at the Southern Cross, which points towards the South Pole. Muslims around the world can use the Orion as a guide to find the Qiblat. Farmers use constellations to identify the change in seasons. When they saw the Scorpius, they knew that it was spring. When they saw the Orion, they knew that it was autumn. By looking at the constellations, farmers knew when to plant and harvest their crops.